Greetings, diners, and welcome to another edition of the Frostbite Falls Daily Rant, here on the Doomstead Diner. Last week, when I started scripting up this rant, His Holiness the Pope, Vicar of Christ on Earth and Chief Cook and Bottle Washer for the Holy Roman Catholic Church, paid a visit to the hallowed halls of Congress to address our cadre of sagacious leaders on good moral principles to run the world on. He also met with King Barry. I meant POTUS Obama-sama, to further elucidate these principles for him as well. Now, it's been quite some time since popes have had much political influence, but clearly Pope Frank is trying to change this. Prior to showing up in Congress to speak his mind, he pitched out a widely publicized encyclical, which, as the title indicates, is sort of like a theory of everything. Now, mind you, I don't have a lot of problems with what is in the encyclical. His Popeness seems to be in favor of cleaning up the environment, distributing the wealth of the world out more equitably, etc. In fact, some of it sounds sufficiently communist that the Vicar of Christ on Earth has been vilified by a few right-wing think tanks as having become death, the destroyer of capitalist worlds. Anybody vilified by a think tank funded by the Koch brothers is somebody I can support, just for that alone. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and all that. Nevertheless, there are all sorts of problems and issues that crop up when you start dropping religion into the political process. Pretty soon, everybody has to buy into the diktats of the religion, which become part of the laws of the state as well. Anybody from a minority religious group ends up getting persecuted. Imagine, for instance, being a Christian female in Saudi Arabia not wearing a burqa. We do have similar discrimination against Muslim women here who do wear the full anti-Monte getup, but it's not official state policy as of yet. Now, a good question here is, why, at this particular moment in time, does Congress invite the Pope in for a speaking engagement? I've been walking the earth for nearly 60 years, and in that entire time, no Pope ever did a stand-up routine in front of Congress before. According to some sources, this was part of a quid pro quo behind John Boehner's resignation. He's a Catholic and has wanted to get the Pope at the congressional pulpit for a sermon for a while. However, there have been other Catholic House speakers like Tip O'Neill, but he never got the Pope to show in Congress. Given Boehner's political ideals, he's not exactly on board with Frank's stance on climate change or wealth redistribution either. So why would he want the Pope in so bad? My guess is this is meant to send a message to the Muslim world that Christians are going to stick together as the holy war of jihad escalates. The Vicar of Christ on Earth is, of course, the most recognizable figurehead of Christianity, even bigger than Joel Osteen. Now, given we are a supposedly secular society with a division between church and state, it's pretty unfair that the Catholics got their chief spokesman up in front of Congress. But so far, no rabbis, no ayatollahs, and not even the Dalai Lama have been sent an invite. No panentheists have been invited to speak either. I'll volunteer for that engagement. Another interesting aspect of the Pope's speech is his choice of wording. He never mentions the term climate change, since this would no doubt get boos and hoots from the deniers occupying more than half the seats there. Rather, he went with the more neutral term of environmental destruction. And of course, everyone is against pollution, at least as long as it doesn't cost too much money to clean it up. The fact religion is becoming more prominent in the political environment is a disturbing, if not unexpected, outcome. Much of the popular sentiment against the refugees stems from the fact they are, by and large, overwhelmingly Muslim. The Hungarians, for instance, have explicitly stated they will only take Christian refugees. Although I don't know how you can determine this with folks leaving war zones with no documentation. Who would you call to find out if they attended Sunday church services recently? There's also a huge cultural divide between the more fundamentalist Muslim sects and the Western culture and ideas about women's rights, standards of dress, and so forth. Polygamy is still acceptable in many Muslim nations, and child brides are fairly common as well. Arranged marriages, rather than the Western ideal of romantic love forming the basis for a marriage, also is common. To the Westerner, this all seems positively medieval. To the Muslim fundamentalist, it is positively lurid that women are allowed to walk around with short skirts and hit the beaches in itsy-bitsy, teeny-weeny, yellow polka dot bikinis. You smash together two groups of people with such wildly different cultural perspectives and sprinkle in the vast inequality of wealth, since even if they had some money when they left their home countries, they are probably dead broke by the time they make it to Sweden or Germany, and you have an instant recipe for social strife. As one might expect from the Vicar of Christ on earth, he is preaching tolerance and compassion for the refugees. But at least so far, he hasn't pitched out the wealth of the Holy Roman Catholic Church to back this up. The Europeans supposedly will be coughing up $1 billion of money they don't have, but even that is chump change. Similarly, at least so far, he hasn't issued an edict to the bishops in all the dioceses that they need to divest themselves of all fossil fuel energy company stocks either. It's all well and good to jawbone peace, love, and understanding. But if you don't put your money where your mouth is, this is not going to make a whole lot of difference. His Holiness could set up a refugee camp in the Vatican. It's his own country. It doesn't even belong to Italy. He's got 109 acres right there to set up a nice refugee camp. Not to mention all the rest of the land the Holy Roman Catholic Church owns all over the world. They own roughly 177 million more acres of various lands, including the hundreds of Vatican embassies that are all legally titled to the Holy See as an independent nation. That's a lot of spots for refugee camps. If they donated just 1 million of that 177 million acres, they could give 1 million refugees each their own acre of land. Has the Catholic Church donated even one parcel of land for a refugee camp as of yet? Besides that, they have their own hedge fund too, the administration of the patrimony of the Holy See. Have they liquidated any of that to help the refugees? I didn't think so. Despite, as of yet, not doing anything concrete, Frank is the most visible and publicity-conscious pope in a long time, probably since Pope Paul, who made a lot of waves with his Vatican II stuff. His recent encyclical promotional video was absolutely hilarious, doing a kind of climate Rocky Balboa parody. No one-arm push-ups, though, like the Italian stallion Stallone pulled off. Following it up with an appearance before Congress, he's practically at a rock star status now. Then off in the papal bus tour to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Well, except for Jim Quinn and the people of Walmart and the 30 blocks of squalor, anyhow. The publicity angle is telling, though, as is the greater focus on religion as a political weapon and tool for moving the masses in one direction or the other. It's obviously occurring down in Islam. They're explicit and upfront about it down there. It's jihad, a holy war against the infidels. Slightly less explicit here, but you can certainly see it in the political cartoons of Charlie Hebdo and the extreme xenophobia of neo-Nazi parties springing up like mushrooms all around Europe. There's a religious propaganda war already in play here. It's not a lot different than how the Japanese were demonized during World War II. They were characterized as being incredibly vicious and violent, which they were, but then so were we. As evidenced, of course, by dropping nuclear bombs on civilians at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anybody claiming some sort of moral superiority as being less violent is full of shit. So now, Muslims are being characterized as vicious and violent because they do old-style beheadings and crucifixions. Meanwhile, the fascist states of America does joystick warfare with drones and drops the death from above anywhere they have lost control of and don't have a puppet dictator doing their bidding. Everybody is dealing out the death in their own fashion, and it doesn't matter if you are crucified or incinerated by a bomb, you are just as dead either way. Is the Pope going to be able to stop any of this by his force of moral authority over a portion of the Christian community? Not hardly likely there. It's just a show, and the Holy Roman Catholic Church is certainly not putting much, if any, of the vast wealth they have accumulated over the centuries to use in helping the refugees, of which there are just too many for anybody to help anymore. You have a serious population overshoot problem here, which no amount of money can solve. The only thing that does solve it is dead people, of which there will be many as we move down the collapse highway here. And that's all the doom. This time until next time, here on the Doomstead Diner.